But welcome to the second morning session. We have heard quite a lot about the new Espon program, and Timo was not shy in underlining the need to actually deliver things that are useful for the policy arena. And those who have been around already during the first Espon program, 2000-2007, they might remember we had those, well, now I would say almost awkward meetings where we just signed the contract for a research project for Espon, and 4 weeks later we were invited to come to DG REGIO and tell them what our preliminary policy conclusions are. At that stage we started organizing the teams, and I think we have 2 years' time of organizing things, and DG REGIO was very clear and saying, that's all very nice, but we have a cohesion report coming up and we need to know now what's coming in. And there was quite a lot of pressure on the Espon projects to be very early with kind of policy relevant conclusions, or PPM it was. Policy, what kind of messages? Some form of policy messages it was. So, and I think that demand is still there today, that Espon actually needs to deliver things that come into the policy context and come timely, and not come 2 years later when the policy agendas have moved on and nobody can remember what Europe 2020 was about, or the territorial agenda, etc. So therefore, I think this session is very important to actually understand where we are in the policy context today, that context that Espon is supposed to serve, and have a discussion around that. And I really would love to not only listen to our distinguished speakers, but also have all the audience involved, because we have quite a lot of policymakers from different parts of Europe in here. While we, at the beginning, rather listen to different ideas of policy context and what Espon might want to do or might be asked to do, I would also ask all of you who are coming from a policy context to think about, in your particular policy context, what would you need? What would be the most important thing that Espon would need to deliver to you? And that's probably about 50% of the people here in the room. Then we have the other 50%. All those researchers that go around saying, yeah, we just want to do nice maps and some fancy analysis and a new project, and we are actually here to hear about our funding opportunities, and let's talk about policy. But now that's your chance. Think about something, the most innovative things that you believe those policy guys haven't thought about yet, but they really would need. So that's your chance to sell it and say, what you're asking for, that's standards that we have done for 10 years now, but there's something where we can do more, which would add even more added value to your policy processes. So again, while you listen to those speakers, while we have the first discussions, while the policy community thinks about really what they need in addition to what we say already, think about what you could deliver that is really innovative and new, and have a chance to sell that into the people here later on in the discussion, so that we really are prepared for when the discussion comes. But before that, I would like to introduce our speakers. And think we have from the European Commission, Philippe, who will tell us everything that the Commission has in mind, as far as he dares or is allowed to. And then we have from the national level, Pedro Campos from the Netherlands, giving us all the insights about the presidency, I hope, and how Espon will be the revolutionary part of the urban agenda, maybe, and see kind of how we are going there, and moving from the national level down to the regional level, and saying in Lombardia, what is going on there? How can Espon actually be useful at a regional level in a quite active region? Adriana May will give us her insights. And then Rasmussen from Nordregio will in the end say, okay, from the research side, that's what we would like to bring in here. And I have asked all of them to be rather short, so that we have a lot of time for discussion. And again, please be prepared for those discussions. I will force you to discuss, don't worry. in order to not lose more time, I would then invite Philippe to come up to the lectern and start with your introduction of what DG REGIO actually would like to request.
Yep. Well, thanks a lot, Kai, for this introduction. I first would like to thank Espon and Luxembourg Managing Authority for inviting me to speak here today. Also for the thanks to the Latvian Presidency for the invitation and for the fantastic organization of this launch seminar. This was already said this morning, but I think it's worth to underline it. Which the organization is indeed great, and this is a great opportunity to launch the program. So I was asked to speak in 10 minutes about the prospects for the review of the EU 2020 strategy, the Juncker Plan, and cohesion policy after 2020. Also to give an insight about what has the Commission in mind. Now that's really a challenge, and I will, of course, disappoint you. So let me just preamble. In fact, I have, and I think we have, very little information concerning the review of the Europe 2020 strategy. In fact, the only information I have is the one which is coming out of the public consultation which took place between May and October 2014, and where we extracted 4 key messages. Well, the first one is that the Europe 2020 strategy is a framework which is relevant to cast and frame the main EU objectives for employment and growth. The headline targets are helpful to monitor the progress, to keep focused on certain objectives. The flagships initiatives have more or less played their role according to expectations, but they need to be more visible, and they need to improve the delivery of the strategy, notably by increasing their ownership at different levels of implementation. But that's, of course, not very much, but still. The Commission is planning to write a report and present its policy conclusions on the future of the strategy later this year, but apart from that, I have no further information. Now, another preamble, for the Juncker Plan, it's even worse. I know the amount, as you do, something like 315 billion euros. I know the delivery mode, which is basically financial instruments implemented by the EIB. I think that even them don't have too much information on how this will work. I know a little bit about what type of projects, interventions will be supported. It is said to be mainly in the fields of trans-European big projects related to transport, to energy, and so on. About the location, where it will take place, I don't know. And about the coherence and possibly the consequences for cohesion policy, because is there some overlap with what cohesion policy is doing, with what the investment funds in general are doing? Certainly. So what are the likely consequences on this EU funding? I have no information at all. So let me go back to the start. I was supposed to speak about the prospect, etc., etc. And I mean, to be realistic, maybe I will change this into the prospect for cohesion policy after 2020. And even this is quite ambitious because I don't know what's going to happen to me and to cohesion policy after 2020, for sure. Okay, so let me just, what I would try to do is to give you some of the information I know about cohesion policy, which may help maybe to see a little bit what is in the interest of the member states, of those who will implement the program in the future. And in order to do that, I will take a look at the information which is extracted from the partnership agreements, where the member states had to say in which thematic objectives. Timo spoke about the 11 thematic objectives this morning. They are just a menu of areas in which the member states are supposed to invest with the help of the structural and investment funds of the EU. And this helps us to see a little bit what are the area of interest in view of the member states. Okay, so first message from this graph, this is This is simply the cohesion policy funding for the 3 structural funds and cohesion fund from 2000 up to 2013. And you see that, in fact, this is expressed as a percentage of gross national income. The resources have been important, and they have been constantly increasing. So that just to say that this, of course, remain an important source of funding. Maybe not at the level of the EU, because this is representing 0.3% of EU GDP. This is peanuts, but for a certain number of member states, this is a considerable amount, because as we will see in a second, there is, of course, a geographical concentration on the less developed part of Europe. Okay, for some member states, it represents something like 3, sometimes almost 4% of GDP, which is considerable. Okay, so this is the concentration. You see that the table there shows different time period: 2000, 2004, 2004 to 2006, 7, 13, 14, 20, and you see that the last line tells you the percentage of total funding for cohesion policy allocated to the less developed regions and less developed member states of the EU. And this turns around between 75, let's say, and 80% almost of funding. So just to say that cohesion funding remains very much concentrated on the less developed part of the EU, so that no change from that point of view. Okay, which also means that, of course, it is to a large extent the issues that are particularly relevant for this part of the EU, which are, of course, maybe something juicy and important for Espon. This is how the total money is allocated among the 11 thematic objectives. You can see that the 2 main thematic objectives in terms of allocation are innovation and R&D on the one hand, and infrastructure on the other hand, which remains very important. Now watch out, because infrastructure covers a wide range of infrastructure. It's transport, it's environment, it's energy, it's telecommunication. So this partly explains why it's so big. But you may wonder, well, but I heard so much that cohesion policy was not supposed to invest so much in infrastructure anymore. No, the big focus was on R&D innovation, and I can see here that infrastructure remains the main item. Well, that's true, and one of the reasons is the one I just explained. But at the same time, if you see how things have changed in time, then you will introduce some nuances in that message. And here, this is how the allocation has changed from the 2000-2006 period up to now, going through the 2007-13 period, and you can see that the allocation to transport has been substantially reduced, and that the allocation to urban transport has been increased. So there is a shift in transport from the big roads, railroad track projects, more to something which is a bit different, and in particular towards urban transport, which is directly connected to another change that we will see in a second, and which is related to a bigger emphasis on climate change, low carbon economy, and so on. Okay, so this is one first observation. This is another one. You see here that compared to the last programming period, member states are intending to spend more on innovation, R&D, and the low carbon economy than in the past. Less on climate change and environment. Less on infrastructure, and more on employment. Okay, so this is the tendency that you have in the partnership agreement. This graph is for the less developed member states, what we call the cohesion countries, so those that are still benefiting from the cohesion funds. But the same message emerged for the others, so for the more developed member states or those not benefiting from the cohesion funding. It's exactly the same tendency. More for innovation and low carbon economy, less for climate change and infrastructure, and more for employment. So this is a general tendency. Okay. What about the type of programs. So this is the evolution as a percentage of the total allocation for national programs in red, regional programs in green, and multi-regional program in blue. And you can see, in fact, that the share of national program is actually increasing from one period to another. So I don't know for how long we are still going to be called regional policy, but it's more and more regional national programs, in fact. Okay, this tendency is definitely increasing in time, and at the same time, of course, the two other categories are decreasing as a share within the total allocation. So, in order to wrap up, continues to invest a lot in the less developed part of Europe, more investment in low carbon economy and in employment, strong link with the overall objectives of the EU. There is a strong link with the thematic objectives of the Europe 2020 strategy. We have just seen this. Everything is structured along these lines now, but also to other big EU policies. There is no direct linkage of cohesion policy with the macroeconomic governance. For instance, the strategies for implementing the structural and cohesion fund have to be articulated with the country-specific recommendations issued by the Council to the member states. There are these macroeconomic conditionalities now, which says, okay, funds could be suspended in case the member states are breaching the provision of the Stability and Growth Pact. So that's another type of link with the other EU policies. More investment in the field of employment and social inclusion, which makes sense in these times of crisis where we have very high unemployment rates across Europe. And finally, more and more national programs versus regional programs. Okay. Now, let me just say a few words about cohesion policy post-2020, because I was supposed to try to say something. And here, of course, it's much too early to provide some policy orientations for 2020. They will come in the 7th Cohesion Report, which is due in 2017. But for the moment, we're preparing the agenda for the policy development, so that is preparing the reflections and the discussion to actually yield the legislative proposal for the 2020 period. And there maybe it's also helpful to see where Espon could play a role. So let me just rapidly go through that. The objective, of course, of this reflection for the policy development is to provide solid ground and evidence to make the policy choices in the future, and in particular to prepare the impact assessment, the financial proposal, and the legislative proposal. Okay, and this policy development process will have three main components. The first one is taking evidence, and in particular from the past programming period. This includes the ex post evaluation of the 2007-2013 programs, the analysis of some key issues that are relevant for cohesion policy, and that you will recognize that some of the issues keep coming back. For instance, in the budget review, where the whole policy package of the Union is discussed and make the object of bargaining between the various policy strands in the Commission. For instance, the investment mix, do we invest more in R&D, do we invest more in infrastructure, in which places should we do that? Is there a possible trade-off between cohesion and EU growth? Okay, this is, for instance, the typical question that we are addressed. You say, well, but you focus on poor regions, you should not do that because you should focus on agglomeration, EU regional policy, right? This is what is important for EU growth. So forget about the poor regions, you should focus on the champion. Is that true or not? But this is, I mean, certainly an issue that we're going to have to address again. The impact of the macroeconomic framework on the effectiveness of the policy, because now, as I just said, it's linked. But do we have evidence that there is a relationship so strong because the effect between the impact of cohesion policy and the macroeconomic framework? This is certainly an area where we will need some more investigation. We're going to take lessons from the program negotiations and implementation also to see, for instance, to what extent Reforms have been integrated in the programs, for instance, the uptake of the territorial approaches, the linkages with the country-specific recommendations, just to give two examples among many. Okay, and information will come from different type of sources. Of course, feedback from the member states, from the stakeholders, from those who implemented the program, from those who observed the programs, that could be Espon, for instance, and also from academia. This is where I include Espon and all type of research that could be relevant to highlight these issues. Identify the options for the future, reflection on objectives and value added of the policy. Why do we have a regional policy at the EU level? Okay, some could say leave it to the member states. Okay, for territorial cooperation program, but of course that's a very small fringe of the allocation. But for the rest, you could leave it up to the member states. So why do we organize a policy at the EU level? Okay, do we find ways to enhance the effectiveness? Okay, for instance, what about the result orientation options that we have taken in the past? Did they deliver? How to increase efficiency? Are we going to speak about alternative delivery modes? For instance, going to budget support instead of shared management? Not for ETC programs, obviously, but for the others, it could be a relevant question, knowing in particular that more and more we have national programs, okay? The architecture and the budget, are we going to keep, for instance, 3 types of regions and so on, and what is the budget? And there again, information will come from exchanges with institutions, member states, and stakeholders, but also with exchanges with academics, including Espon. Okay. Impact assessment and legislative proposal. As I said, the policy orientations will come out in the 7th Cohesion Report in 2017. It will be followed by a public consultation concerning the policy orientation, and finally by a proposal concerning the budget and the financial envelope in 2018. And finally, the impact assessment, which will be conducted using the material collected in steps 1 and 2 that we just described to check what is the expected impact of this new generation of programs for the future, okay? Just to give you, and I will finish with that, some milestones for this preparation process. End of 2015, we're going to have a policy communication which is supposed to show how the new programs have been negotiated, how the funds will be used, and what are the expected impact for the structural and investment funds of the EU. This covers the cohesion policy funds, but also rural development and the fisheries. Okay, so this is due at the end of this year. 2016, this will be the start of the budget review, where we're going to have all these philosophical, but possibly with some consequences, on cohesion policy within the broad context of the EU policies. 2017, we're going to have the Cohesion Report, the elaboration on the MFF proposal, the first strategic report on the 2014-2020 program, so the first observation on how it works, what has been achieved, first results, monitoring, and so on. And finally, in 2018, the adoption, hopefully, of the next legislative proposal. Okay? That's about it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. That was very informative indeed. And I assume there are a number of reflections or questions in the room. Now you have the chance to ask Philippe whether he can clarify, further explain, or... Yes, please. Can you just briefly who you are, say who you are as well?
Thank you. In my opinion,
Sorry. That one works better.
Okay. Juncker Plan is a Keynesian model and is proposed as a past macroeconomic vision facing the crisis. So it's a link with the Draghi Plan, and the movement of economy has got a problem, because in this neo-Keynesian idea, there is not the place evidence. And in your discourse, the gap is between the top-down vision from Juncker Plan of the model of the new economy, of the development facing the crisis, employment, and so on, and the demand, the bottom-up demand from territorial question. Regions are the mediators of this process, but Juncker Plan and Draghi Plan devoted to banks the role of decide the investment, and for this there is material investment in the transport or other urban question that they see and don't see the question, the general question of policy. So the gap is between a long-term spatial planning then could include the investment for a long period and the future of our territories, and the immediately question linked to investment. So what is the relation between integrated territorial investment without this vision? So.
Okay, thank you very much. That was quite a challenging one. Maybe we can select one or two more before we give the floor to Philippe. Any further questions? Yes. Just to make sure that you get the microphone that's working. Yeah.
Thank you. Philippe, you explained that the Commission proposal, legislative proposal, will be on the table in 2018. We probably will have a flavor of it in the Cohesion Report, in the 7th Cohesion Report. So this is, 2017. The Espon program is going to produce results in the end of 2016. So how those results could be used in order to serve as evidence for the new proposal?
Thank you. A very concrete question. One more? Yes? I think. Can you just introduce yourself as well?
Elisabeth Stix, I come from Vienna, ECP from Vienna. Philippe, you explained the way to the policy development 2020 plus of the cohesion policy. And so, in your opinion, the Espon program should should play an important role in this policy development of the future cohesion policy. That's also a little bit the question the person before me asked. So the role of Espon in development of the future cohesion policy, which is this part, or which role is that? And should Espon also play a role in the, let's say, a monitoring of the current cohesion policy? So that's my question, the role of the Espon in the now acting cohesion policy and in the future cohesion policy there. Maybe you can say a few words on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think we have got 3 quite challenging questions here. We don't need another presentation if you can kind of give a few keywords on the responses.
I will try. I will try to answer the first question because I'm not sure I got it right. But if what I understood is that there is a concern that there is a disconnection between, let's say, the macroeconomic and let's say EU level economic policies and those that can be conducted and the initiatives that can be taken at subnational levels in particular, and how do we manage to have coherence between a top-down approach and what is needed at subnational levels. I would say the current framework still leaves lots of room for flexibility. What needs to be demonstrated is how the interventions that are taken at all levels of governance can in fact support and be coherent with the actions that are taken at other levels, upper levels, for instance. Now, for me, that is not a problem in a sense, because I mean, more and more, in fact, regional and local authorities play a very important role in delivering public investment. And when I speak about public investment, it's broadly speaking. It's to a large extent the areas that we are covering usually in Espon. So what needs to be done within the framework, what this framework is trying to do is to increase coherence between what is done at different levels of governance, but still I think leaving a lot of flexibility for actors at various levels to play their role and express their needs. I don't think that the new framework is putting, for instance, the principles of subsidiarity at stake. Certainly, you can question, because you were speaking about Keynesian or another type of paradigm in your question. Certainly, I mean, you can question the broad macroeconomic governance of the EU. I think this is another debate. I don't want if we want to have it here, especially if we are web streamed. So, but as far as regional policy is concerned and Espon is concerned, definitely we are on the Keynesian side, because in fact, more and more for some member states, cohesion policy money represent the most important source of financing for public investment. And we know that the crisis has been translated by a massive drop, I mean a very dramatic drop in investment in general and in public investment in particular. So there I think that we are on the side of trying to maintain public investment at an acceptable level, to limit the damages, to support demand in general through that, and still to leave some room of maneuver for various levels of governance. For the other questions, I will take the two at once. I think I see many different roles and areas in which Espon could play a role. For instance, I don't know, we were speaking about investment mix. Now, what type of interventions should we have, for instance, for a revival of our labor markets in the EU, especially that now that we see that we have so much differences in the labor market behavior from one place to the other. If you look, the Spanish situation, where you have regions that are not so much affected in terms of unemployment, and others where the situation is dramatic. What type of support should we bring to our small and medium enterprises? What type of investment should we have in the field of infrastructure? That's what type of spatial organization of the EU should we support? That's key questions for the future policy design, and that are definitely, I think, in the area of Espon. And I find that the intervention, the question concerning the 2007-13 program is particularly relevant. As I said here, we are going to have to extract some key information from the past to design the future. And I think that definitely Espon could help to see what we have done in the past programming period, how well it has worked, how it has not worked, to highlight what we should do in the future. So yeah, definitely I think that Espon could have a quite important role in monitoring what has, well, not monitoring, but analyzing what has been done in the past and how well it worked. So that's clear for me.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm sure we have the possibility to come back to some of those questions at the end of this session and in the afternoon in one of the workshops. Now I would like to move on to the intergovernmental and national level and ask Pedro to give us his presentation to kick off the discussion. The floor is yours. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Kai. I first of all want to thank the Luxembourg colleagues and the Espon colleagues for inviting me to speak about the urban agenda. I think it's very important that we link up the urban agenda with the work which is done on the territorial agenda and the work that Espon will do. And I also want to thank the Latvian colleagues for hosting this conference. I called this presentation an EU urban agenda from Riga to Amsterdam, but actually I should call it from paper to action, because we've been talking about the urban agenda a lot these last years, but now I think it's time for action. I think everybody acknowledges the need for an urban agenda. So now, this coming year, I hope we will take sufficient action that we can launch an urban agenda during the Dutch presidency, because I work for the Dutch Ministry of Interior. My name doesn't suggest it, but I work for the Netherlands. And in May next year, we will have the Amsterdam ministerial meeting where we want to launch the urban agenda. So today I will tell you more about our goals of the Dutch presidency, how Espon can contribute to the urban agenda, and I will give you an idea of the main milestones we will have during the next 12 months, during the Luxembourg presidency and during the Dutch presidency. First of all, why should we need an urban agenda? I think the main reason is that cities, member states, and the EU share the same ambition. So we want a smart, green, and inclusive growth. And for cities to contribute to this ambition, we need to create the right conditions. And we need to create the right conditions at the different levels of governance. So it should be at city level, at national level, but also at European level. So the EU should also provide the right conditions through their regulations, through their financing, but also through their knowledge infrastructure, so that cities can provide and also stimulate growth in the EU for the coming years after, well, the coming 20, 30 years. What are the goals of the Dutch EU presidency? Well, we want to launch the urban agenda through a political declaration and really start with on action with the urban agenda. For that, we have a couple of elements which I will inform you about. First of all, it's a new urban acquis, which is actually it's more a consolidation of all the knowledge and of all the experience we've had on urban development in the last years. We need to have a selection of thematic priorities. It's very important to make choices, to be selective, and to be very concrete of what we want to achieve. A third one is a stronger urban dimension in EU policy. What does that entail? How do we want to concretely strengthen the urban dimension in EU policy? And the last one is cooperation between member states, cities, European Commission, and other stakeholders on these priority areas. And I will inform you about this also because that's the point where I see where Espon can contribute to the urban agenda. The new urban acquis. As you may know, the European debate on urban development has been here for 20, 30 years. We've had the Toledo Declaration, the Leipzig Charter. We've had different declarations where we have summed up what we think is important in urban development. We've also had experiences with different initiatives. I think it's in this new urban acquis, we want to sum up what these experiences are, what we can learn from these experiences, and how we can apply them in the new urban agenda. And so we can have a more effective urban agenda, which will have a concrete effect on urban policy on the European level. So that's the first element of the urban agenda. The second one is agreement on thematic priority areas. If you look at urban development in the last 20, 30 years, I think it's been mostly focused on the problems in cities. Poverty, migration, and I think we now should have a more balanced idea of what is important in urban development. We should also look at opportunities. We should also look at smart cities and how cities offers opportunities to solve problems, but also to take opportunities of the economic initiatives that are being developed in cities. So what we will do now is that the member states will choose 2 or 3 priority areas, taking into account what the Commission has been doing in the last year. They published the staff working document yesterday, in which they are formulating 3 very broad areas: green, smart, and inclusive. We will also take into account what cities have been naming as priorities. For example, your cities has published a strategic framework in which they also identify very broad themes. So I think now it's for the member states. It's up to the member states to be selective and to choose 2 or 3 themes, very concrete themes, on which we should act within the urban agenda. And what we will do is that before summer, after next week when we will sign the Riga Declaration, we will send out a survey to member states asking them what are the 2 or 3 themes that are very important for your cities, and also the question to which themes would you commit? Would you commit resources to work on this urban agenda? And what is very important is that these priority areas should be cross-sectoral. These should be areas where an integrated approach is needed and where the integrated approach in cities encounter problems at the EU level in terms of regulations or funding. Here I've summed up some issues that have already come up in the urban agenda. Urban poverty was the issue raised by our Greek colleagues. Intra-EU migration was the issue by our Lithuanian colleagues. So these themes could come back in the urban agenda after 2016, and we could build concrete partnerships around these themes. So this is just to give you an idea what concrete areas we are thinking of. Thirdly, what is our main aim is strengthening the urban dimension in EU policy, and we're looking at 3 instruments. Better regulation. This means we're not looking at more regulation. We want to improve existing regulations and see how cities, what problems cities encounter when they have to implement regulation. Also, looking at better workable EU funds. How can we improve the usability of EU funds? How can we improve combining ESF, for example, with ERDF for cities? Because some cities encounter problems with that. A third one, and this one is the relevant one for Espon, is how can we improve the knowledge base? Where are the gaps in the knowledge base if you look at urban development? And also how can we better combine using existing platforms for knowledge exchange? I see I have 3 minutes left, so I have to go very quick through the partnerships. But the partnership is the main issue within the urban agenda. What we want to do, we want to form concrete partnerships within about these concrete priority areas. This will be coalition of the willing. This will be the member states, cities, DGs of the Commission, but also stakeholders who want to work together and who want to commit resources in working on these concrete issues and want to achieve better urban dimension in EU policy. We want to come to concrete recommendations for the European Commission to improve the urban dimension and also offer concrete solutions. We will start these pilot partnerships after summer with the idea of launching these partnerships during the Dutch presidency. During an exploration phase, we want to talk about, with the stakeholders, we want to talk about what are the objectives of the partnerships, what are the gaps in the different sectors, if you look at regulation, funds, and knowledge. So that we can affirm during the Dutch presidency what are the partnerships, who wants to work on it, and what are the objectives of these partnerships. So how can Espon contribute to the urban agenda? So as I just mentioned, I think Espon can strengthen the knowledge base. We can work together on seeing where are the gaps in the knowledge base. But I think most importantly maybe is Espon can also put the urban issues in a wider spatial perspective. How does these urban issues affect the issues in the rural areas and vice versa? I think that's the link we should maintain. So secondly, as mentioned here, it's very important to link the urban agenda also to the territorial agenda because you can't see them apart from each other. And I think it's important we should make use of existing data that is available at Espon, build on the Espon projects, and use the experts which Espon has to its availability. So I hereby invite Espon to also participate in these pilot partnerships, to bring in their knowledge, and to see how we can build these partnerships together. So here's shortly a roadmap of what will happen in 2015 on these partnerships. Well, yesterday the staff working document of the Commission was presented, which is a very important document. Next week we will sign this declaration, which will be a milestone because we will confirm that Commission, Member States, and cities will work together on this urban agenda. And well, this year we will start working on these partnerships, and we will also, at the end of the year, draft the first draft of the declaration. And in 2016, we will work further on these partnerships through working groups, so that we can come to the launch of these working groups in the end of May, 30th of May in Amsterdam, and we can sign the declaration and we can really start to work on the urban agenda. So I want to conclude by inviting Espon again to work on these partnerships and to be a strong partner in the urban agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So kind of different topic, different agenda. Any comments, questions, how Espon relates to that? We got a broad invitation here. How is Espon taking that? Yes? Oh, you're getting... Oh.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Katarzyna Wojnar, former Polish ECP. And I have a question whether you see any possibility that Espon could deliver any urban-related data parallel to your work and to your cooperation on this agenda. Do you see any possibility like that in the upcoming framework? Thank you.
Thanks. Shall we just collect maybe a few more questions? Oh. She's faster than me.
I'm Peter Austin from Oslo. I represent a member of Eurocities. I'm very glad that you referred to Eurocities in your presentation. I would certainly hope that Espon would be able to contribute to the important work that the Dutch presidency will be doing on developing the urban agenda. I would very much hope that the Espon program will be able to involve cities directly. We'll be hearing more about this in the next couple of days in developing projects that will be highly relevant to developing the work you're doing. Just a simple question. You refer to the survey of member states. We have some partnership states within the Espon structure as well, including Norway, where I come from. I hope that we'll also be invited to contribute to your survey.
Okay, thanks. A very concrete question. Yes. Now I'm faster.
Peter Schön, BBSR Bonn. Is there any discussion or intention to link the EU urban agenda with the United Nations urban agenda and with the Habitat 3 conference in 2016? And what would be the role of the Dutch presidency, the member states, the Commission, and maybe ultimately also from Espon in this combination?
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, one more from the Netherlands.
I was wondering if there were plans to link the working together on these thematic projects with the member states to a priority 2 Espon project, because Espon seems to be a good way to deliver that.
Okay, thank you. And then I give the floor back to you too.
Yes, thank you. The first question about urban data and if Espon can provide them parallel to this process. I think it's possible. I think it's very important. I would welcome that Espon would deliver these urban data for us. So I don't see a problem there. I would just mostly welcome it. All the data all the data we can use, we would welcome it in our discussions. Second, Espon. This second question was about Espon and the cities. I don't.
Partnership with the cities and with the non-member states.
Yes, non-member states. Yes. Well, actually, this survey will be sent out to the Urban Development Group, and this Urban Development Group also includes partner states. So these will also have the opportunity to give their priorities to us. And I think it's important that if that Espon also involves more cities in their projects, which also will help us in the urban agenda further. Then a question about habitat and the United Nations. Well, there is a link with the habitat. The states of European States of Cities report will be developed by the European Commission together with Habitat. And there is a working group on for Europe on giving input for the habitat. I think it's called the new urban agenda. So there will be a link between those two. And the last one was about the Espon projects. I think that it will always be possible to see if we can link Espon projects to the urban agenda. We just have to see which priority areas will come out, and then we'll have to see how we can use each other and how we can help each other in developing the urban agenda.
Okay, thank you very much, and I hope that you can deepen that also in the workshop after lunch, where we go actually further into how things can work together. I see a little bit an issue of timing with your timetable and the timetable that Timo presented, but I'm sure you're able to sort that out. I would then like to move on and move one step further in the concreteness and saying, if we go to the regional level, what are the expectations from Lombardia? Adriana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Espon Managing Authority and to Latvia for inviting me to this meeting. Actually, I'm here with, well, I should say 3 hats, because I'm a member of Espon Monitoring Committee. I am from Lombardy Regional Government, and I'm a member of Alpine Space Program Committee member. And that's why we will talk of region, but more than a region, of transnational programs and macro region, where Lombardy is one of the actors, because the Alpine macro-regional strategy is a macro-regional strategy that has a bottom-up, was born as a bottom-up strategy. The first initiative came from the regions. Then the states and the Commission was involved in it. So now all the actors are working together to build the strategy. The program has been prepared before the strategy was ready, because the strategy will be approved by the end of this year. But there is a strong alignment, because the territorial needs are very clear to everybody in our areas. We think we are facing 3 main challenges. The first one is to develop tailor-made policies taking into account territorial diversities. In many workshops and meetings we had in the last months, we really could touch with our hands that diversity is an asset. It's an asset for a more sustainable development. The second challenge is we are cooperating at a transnational level. I've been cooperating for a long time, and even a longer time in the Alpine area, where spontaneous initiatives of transnational cooperation were born. And we need to capitalize the results and make them permanent, because I've seen many very good projects, but they don't are enough accessible to everybody after the projects are closed. And the third challenge is investing in a new multi-level governance model. We need to grant a better coordination between different initiatives to have a critical mass for giving more substance and more strength to the policies. A very brief word about the Alpine region. Involves 7 countries, 70 million people. I didn't put it in writing because the number changes on how to look at it, but 47 regions, 450,000 square kilometers, and a mountain core, but it's surrounded by intensely urbanized and industrialized metropolitan areas. And the Alpine region is a trans-European crossroad, but has very big problems of internal connectivity. And also here you can see the urban development around the mountain areas. So it's not only mountain, the Alpine region, but the mountains are a very important part of it. And the last thing to make into evidence is the Alpine region is a water tower for all Europe, Danube, Rhine, Rhone, well, also our Po. This is smaller but very important for us, are born in the Alpine region. This is the area. In green, you can see the Alpine Convention. The Alpine Convention is a treaty that has been signed in 1991, and they are part of the group working on the strategy. In blue, you see the ESIF macro region, and in red, the Alpine Space cooperation area. So there are some differences between them, but the main area is common. I will say very, very briefly the objectives, and I will talk about them together. So I leave the slides for reference, but the first one is innovation, both making innovation more accessible to enterprises, especially small, medium enterprises, and innovation in public services delivering, because this is important for keeping people in the inner areas. The second objective for the strategy is accessibility, both in the more concrete sense of roads and railways, but also accessibility to information society and communication. The third one is about sustainability, general sustainability. So it's environment, renewable energy, and cultural heritage, which is very important. And the most challenge is the governance. Governance means is being. I will read it because the aim to change the partners' mindset towards more cooperation and coordination of action. This is the most challenging, and this is something very where sharing information is very important. So what's the role of information and consequently what can be the cooperation with Espon for us? The first thing is we need common information. So we already have many experiences, but we need to make it systematic, to share a common understanding of the problems, but also to be able to know in figures what the situation is, to have common indicators in all phases of the process. Here we are in the early stages of the process. We had a common workshop with people from the program and people from the strategy in early May, and we will see the first results in the next program committee on the 23rd of June. We started working on the specific needs on the side of information and common tools. So what can we see for Espon to help us and maybe work together? We need to better position the Alpine macro-region in the European and global context. So we need data to compare with the external, in a bigger framework and a bigger vision. We need a common knowledge and perception of the Alpine region assets and weaknesses. So we need to share information on the internal of the macro region. And I think for my experience, Espon has a very good potential for networking with other macro regions on other transnational cooperation across Europe, and maybe not only. And then this is the most difficult task, I think. For the implementing phase, we need a transnational indicator for monitoring. It's already difficult monitoring policies when you do concrete things. But to monitor, to find the right indicator for monitoring something that is immaterial, how can we verify whether the strategy is really effective, whether we will have really better and more coordinated policies, and that can produce effect on the territories. This is really a very big challenge. We know Espon already is working in the Baltic area for helping the macro region, the macro regional strategy in this, and we think this could be an important area of cooperation. Thank you very much for
Thank you very much. So again, quite a number of points for Espon to come in and help the macro-regional dimension in the Alpine area. Questions, comments? Who in Espon has worked with the macro-regional strategies in the Alpine area? Nobody. Peter, what have you done? Nobody has.
No, just to maybe give a slight remark, a short remark on this. I think that it's actually one of the elements in the new program that say some kind of territorial monitoring, maybe a system similar to what has been done in the Baltic Sea region that should be offered to other EU macro regions. And this is part of the program, and this will be something that these EU macro regions will be invited to voice their interest in such support. So this is already very well included in the new program. I'm saying something that it was envisaged for tomorrow, but I think it fits here anyhow. And I would also maybe, if Pedro is not here tomorrow, just give us a slight feedback to your invitations, because also here I believe there are opportunities in the new program. One is, of course, that there are territorial impact assessment methodologies. I mean, it's worthwhile a reflection to what extent that could also maybe be developed further and integrate an urban dimension, as was asked for. There are an urban section in the Espon database that we should together look into to see if there is anything of interest for you there. There is the targeted analysis that will also be part of the new program. And here, of course, also cities, groups of cities can ask for this kind of analytical support. Maybe there is an opportunity there as well. And last but not least, I mean, as Timo also mentioned in the beginning of today, there is this clear change of the, say, modalities of the new Espon program, that we will have the in-house capacity to actually offer analytical support, say rapid as it's called, and this is particular thought as something that could also be to the benefit of EU presidency countries. So if there is a special, say, a demand here, maybe this is also something that could be considered, and maybe a short analytical paper on maybe the themes once they are more clear. If Espon has evidence on some of these themes, this could be considered as such a rapid brief or delivery, whatever we end up calling it. So thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you very much. Any kind of, yes? Okay.
Thank you, Tomáš Iglič from Slovenia. I would have one comment actually, and I would say what Espon cannot do, not rather what it can do. I think at Espon it cannot improve the governance inside these macro-regional strategies, macro-regional areas, and this is the most important question that those of us who are, let's say, living in those areas and are dealing with sort of any kind of programs should ask more often. To illustrate what I want to say is, in the Alpine Space, in the Alpine area, we are now piling layer of different, let's say, structures on the top. We have the convention, we have the program, now we have the strategy, and the tasks. Every single organization like that, of course, is to improve the governance, to let's say, to improve the cohesion, to improve the cooperation among different actors, and they all failed. And I think that here we need to do something else. And we have a lot of data about the Alps. Last Friday I was on the presentation of the new demographic report from the Alpine Convention. It's very good to have very great data, but this is not enough. We need to find something more, and to be maybe a bit juicy. It came to me that this is like creation of the Alps. You know, there was millions of years ago there was a sea, and there was a limestone was slowly, you know, was creating in this sea, and then something has to happen, something very violent, and Africa has to hit Europe, and then these beautiful Alps were created. And I think we need a change in our mindset. Thank you.
Thank you very much. But just to come back on that, well, you point out there are limitations of there are certain things we cannot expect Espon to deliver. But at the same time, you hinted a little bit at that maybe the way Espon results are presented could still be improved in order to get a higher uptake. Would that be a fair conclusion from what you said?
It can be. That's also what we're trying. Also, I work on the national level, and we try very often, basically, to show this Espon results, and we try to interpret results, not to the stakeholders, to policymakers, and so on. So of course, this is the role of Espon. But maybe even if you go through this list, I would say that the Espon doesn't have that very big challenge because it does all that. It collects data basically. It shows different regions in the European context. So it's something that does already. But what I want to say is that the problem is somewhere else.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else who wants to react to that challenge, or you're all waiting just for the lunch break? Adriana, do you want to have a quick?
Well, very briefly. Well, I thank Peter for the disponibility. I knew something. I can't be more precise because we still are in the early phases of the process, and but we think there will be good opportunities for cooperation. And on the other side, the process is up to us, not to Espon or anybody else. But I think, well, if you give me a few minutes, I could make an example we had in Lombardy. The Lombardy Council was preparing a law about giving priority to disadvantaged mountain areas in funding in certain. So they needed indicators. They needed to decide what how to graduate these disadvantages, and they couldn't reach an agreement. They had in mind different criteria, so we came. They asked our help. I was in a GIS system for Lombardy, and we prepared maps with a simulation of the criteria. And they said, well, we can throw all of them away because they knew the territory, and they verified the impact of on the territories they knew. And they asked us to make a proposal, and showing the impact of the decisions on the reality in much more, maybe 1 month and a half, 3-4 meetings, they reached an agreement because it's true. There is the expert can't substitute the politicians, but they can give them a better insight on what the territorial impact of the choices is. So this is the kind of help we could have by Espon.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think that was a very nice introduction to Rasmus' presentation of what insights you think could be offered or should be offered.
Yeah. So, thank you again, as the others, for this opportunity to put emphasis on some issues that I think are important in connection with the new Espon program. And for those of you who don't know what is Nordregio, Nordregio is an institution owned by the Nordic Council of Ministers, and as you can see, its perspectives are well in different regions, both Europe as such, then the Baltic Sea region, and of course the Nordic countries, and furthermore the Arctic. And we have had this very good opportunity for the last many years actually to be working in Espon projects. We have had 14 projects on applied research, 3 on targeted analysis, and 3 on scientific platforms. And I think it's an excellent experience, and I totally agree on what you mentioned earlier. Doing maps is wonderful, but it's not everything. And I'll try to bring forward both the topical sides of research challenges, but also the methodological side of research activities. And it's, of course, flavored to some extent on the position of the Nordic countries in connection with, for instance, bioeconomy and circular economy. You may be confused by the picture there, but it's from a city in Denmark, Kalundborg, where the Symbiosis Center is distributing, let's say, output and waste materials from different companies. For instance, Novozymes, where the waste material becomes fodder for agriculture and becomes generating heat and other issues for nearby companies. So this is, in my perspective, in our perspective, very much an issue that is important to bring forward, especially with this ideas of a low carbon economy for Europe as such. This is definitely something to look into. Similarly to renewable energy sources and the combinations of the different renewable energies. This is from South Italy, where a combination of biogas production and, of course, solar panels adds to the local energy production. A major concept that I would like to put emphasis on here is what's called triple bottom line. And of course, this is pointing to the idea of having synergies between the economic, the social, and the environmental output of production. Always remember to think of all three components in order to, generate energy, generate labor, workplaces, and then make use of the local renewable resources. I think the mayor this morning pointed to a very important issue, namely, this is a touristic place, but at the same time, it still make use of the local renewable resources. And the point is that there will be symbiosis and there will be synergies between those different approaches. In the Nordic countries, but also other parts of Europe, you experience sparsely populated areas, and these years you actually experience what this tries to show, the urbanization process, where the smaller rural places are emptied from the younger generation, and eventually turns out to lack important labor forces, knowledge and insight, and then of course the new generation to take over in the smaller places. An issue when we are talking about the synergies is also multifunctionalities, that landscapes can be used in many ways. For instance, in this case, you have a farm producing barley for human use or animal use, and then in addition to that, you produce straw for local energy production, and of course have a windmill around and generating the electricity that is needed in this specific region. So stop thinking about monofunctionality and remember to think in multifunctionalities, and I envisage that the Espon suggestions may include issues like this. Urban-rural interaction, we had the presentation of the urban part of this before. This is from a place in Sweden where there is mobility from the rural places due to the establishing or making use of old places as second homes for people usually living in cities, and thereby maintain connections and activities in the smaller places when the younger part of the population leave the places, and you may end up with let's say, demographic challenges like in this situation. So there are a number of issues and topics research-wise that could add to the whole discussion of what is actually the territorial evidence then of what of cohesion, yes, definitely, but also the need of focusing on place-based needs in order to have a good starting point for the local discussions. When jumping to methodological, well, first of all, we very often, when we try to do this place-based research, we use triangulation. That is a combination of register data, which of course might be available at the national statistical bureaus, and in the Espon context, there is a very good, there are very good facilities for data in the Espon database. But in order to get the connection to the community, you need to look into possibility of including surveys and interviews in order to have the place-based perspectives on this, and you do that by the triangulation. Make sure that whatever topic you are working with should include all three aspects of analysis. Then another topic will be this about modeling and community-based micro-simulations, because you cannot really do, let's say, modeling on a local place. You need to do these simulation activities, and then using the Foresight approach as a basis for doing, well, involving the communities in the whole process. I've added a map that we did at Nordregio a couple of years ago, showing extensification, the green parts, and intensification of land use in Europe, where in order to do that, you cannot read them out of the data. You need actually to do modeling of what happens and what are the interaction between the land use data and the socioeconomic data that you should use in this connection. And then finally, on the methodological part, the inclusion of new alleys for getting data. This is, for instance, twitters. There is 1.5 million twitters from the Arctic parts of both Europe, but also of the rest of the Arctic. And you might see here Scotland. It was just before the election in Scotland, which shows, first of all, that there are a lot of tweets going on in this connection, but furthermore, that it's possible to actually, by using the tools that you have in tweets, the hashtags, for instance, you will be able to do surveys simply by sending out a hashtag with an identification of a topic you want reflections on, and then you will be able to get the results back. And you can also, this is in Reykjavik in Iceland, you can actually locate the hashtags down to, well, to squares, and thereby not only doing the large-scale surveys, but you can actually do detailed surveys. I must admit, I didn't ask people if they want to contribute to this survey, but usually when you ask people about, and you do that, sending out a hashtag, people are very willing and open to respond to this kind of issues. So I think also when it comes to methods, Espon should think about what new opportunities exist and how then to include these opportunities. And finally, well, we are in a situation, it has been mentioned before, that we are beyond only looking at the European perspectives, because, well, we have worldwide mobility, and we have worldwide interest. The EU interested in what happens in the Arctic, and people outside Europe, Africa, and Russia and other parts of the world looking into, well, what to do, what opportunities exist in Europe. And of course, it has consequences for the analysis that we do inside Europe, that we have this worldwide mobility. So, yeah, I think I'll stop there. I only would like to present a saying we do have in the research environment, that is, it does not matter whether you are rich and poor, or poor, as long as you have money. So we are looking forward to the next Espon program. So
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments on Rasmus' presentation, additional ideas of new data? And may I ask the rest of the panel to come back?
Peter mentioned the TEMO project made for the Baltic Sea region, and that was a good job done by consultants. But what I would like to say that it's really difficult to find out so good in the indicators, and you can easily update the data sets. There is always the additional expert judgment is needed to be able for some indicators to update them. So that I can see this is the challenge for this. This is really good tool. There is like formulas, like this is a toolbox how to calculate. But there are a lot of data where there is no possibility just to retrieve the data, from instance, from Eurostat or national database. You have to have do some extra job to update this. So that still remains a challenge for.
So you think Espon has to update those things more regularly? Thank you very much. Further, yes. Okay, I'll come to you later.
Well, I'm Jon Knudsen from Norway, and thank you, Rasmus, for a very interesting presentation. But I would like to ask you, you were mentioning the two-sided aspects of research, that is the topical and the methodological. But shouldn't you add a third aspect, and that is the theoretical? Because, I mean, you have to have some idea of how these topics connect. And I think this is perhaps the weakness of spatial analysis, that we don't have an opening for those theories in the first place. They should be there because we have to have theory to sort of organize the framework in which we put the topics. And this is a question that goes beyond the question of methodology in itself. And if you don't pay attention to it and do it properly, we don't have any way to put things forward to politicians, and no wonder then why they are left in some kind of limbo. And you could sustain, or you could support, or you could contest the kind of theoretical interpretations that are made, but they have to be made. And I think therefore I would ask for the theoretical aspect to be added to your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, one more comment and we come back to you. You were intervening immediately.
Just a small addition to what Ingun already said. And I liked a lot this last phrase, research as long as you have money. And I would hate if that money would go for data updating only. So it is really of importance to find the best way how we could smoothly update without giving a lot of attention and money to that.
So kind of new data, but probably for free. Okay, one more comment, then we come back.
A very short question, but tying together what a lot of you have been saying, is there an opportunity for the Espon program to work on developing a stronger database below NUTS 3 level? This is so important to understand the spatial structure with it, the spatial challenges within the urban structures. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Then I would give the word back to Rasmus.
Basically, first of all, a short comment to what you put emphasis on, that is difficult, very often difficult to get very detailed data when you're looking into, for instance, Eurostat, because it takes time to update and make sure that those data sets are correct, and that's why I point to this triangulation as an option for, well, adding to the details of specific data. I should mention that there is actually a program going on between the Nordic Council of Ministers and the 3 Baltic countries on mobility between the Nordic countries and the Baltic countries, where we are using this context. That is, we try to look for what is available already in the register data, but furthermore, through interviews and surveys, try to add up on newer data, because as we have the basis, it's possible to use surveys and especially interviews to update the major part of these data sets. And some point of time we might try to do the tweets in order to have response. When we look at the number of tweets taking place in the 3 Baltic countries, it's substantial, and therefore there is an audience open for that. It's a challenge because, well, do we know who are actually responding? To some extent, but it's a new research agenda that is needed to look into in the European setting.
Okay. Thank you very much. We have still a few minutes left, and we have a lot of voices we haven't heard today. So I would now like to ask you to take 2 minutes with your neighbor and really come up with your most important statement about, either from a policy perspective, saying that is what you need from Espon. We have heard a number of things, so you can build on that or repeat that if you say that was really the most important one. Or, well, Rasmus also gave a number of hints from the research side, saying there are new things that can be done. So if you say there's a new thing we really think Espon should approach in order to be more relevant and more up to date, please do that. So just take 2 minutes with your neighbor and come up with one conclusion and statement which you would like to recommend to Espon. And I go around then, so don't cheat. Okay, 2 minutes from now. One question. At the end, I would like to ask each of you for a final statement, kind of more, if you take Rasmus' Twitter time, saying really kind of one sentence saying Espon should do, or I need from Espon. And what I found interesting, particularly with your 2 presentations, if you look at the timetable, you actually need a lot of short-term inputs rather than new study themes. And I guess that could be also a topic saying that requires a different way of working, because it doesn't help you if they launch now in October a study where you get a result in 2017. You need something rather short, which is a different way of working, which also would be a message to say, be aware of those things, that it's not only about topics, it's also about delivering on time for a policy process. I don't know, but if everybody could think about one final statement to give to Timo or Peter or the community, and then I hope we get a few statements that we can build on for the discussion now. Okay, perfect. Mr. Max, have a short. You continue. Those birds, everybody has got on.
Yes.
Yes, I know. Can you say a few words about why you got a point? Because I thought if you make everybody blow and saying every time they have a good idea.
We did it during the Espon Monitoring Committee actually, because I said that it's for objection. There were no microphones on the table, so that if everybody wants to object, you just have to whistle.
Yes.
So, but
no, but
so
is there a story why it is if you just can say a few words why we got a bird and not
something chocolate inside.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know. I guess there is a story why it is this kind of bird.
I actually don't know, but I have to think about it.
If not. I just invent something and you.
You can invent. You can feel free because there is no story.
Okay,
So that
okay,
is
I
just
thought
a
it was
handicraft,
something
and
national.
each bird is different.
Yes,
and
I know.
handmade, each is different.
I have already translated.
Because we are like, how would say, Latvians are nature lovers. We love the birds. We love all these creatures. That's why we are.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, you have about 30 seconds more to go. So it seems there were a lot of ideas floating around in the room. And I would be happy to collect a few of them so that so that we can hand something over to Timo if he is listening. Any volunteers to start, or shall I just take the microphone and go around? No volunteers? Yes, yeah.
Thank you. Adam Radmansky from BBSR Germany. Actually, I was thinking about if I should tweet my opinion or say, because many people are watching our live stream. That's some good news. And I checked, we also have some Twitter activities at the moment. But now I say, my opinion, or our opinion, because actually we agreed with Tomasz completely on that there is a lot of information already. There is a lot of things that Espon already produced, also in the last program, and the question is if we use it. And I remember 7 years ago, when we started the first ECP project in the old program, we were not really allowed to promote the results of the first program, because that was another program and we were not financed for communicating the old program. I really hope this will not be the case this time, because I think there is a lot of information that should be used. We can always complain about the availability of data on local level or time series or whatever, or extra tools that may be already there. We should explore what is already there, and we should improve only there where we really need to improve, and not really just inventing the wheel again, or not seeing the forest from the tree, or saying some few nice words in this content. So I think capitalization is very important, and I really hope that the first capitalization activities can start soon and will be allowed to promote also the old results of Espon.
Okay, that was a clear statement. Thank you very much. Anybody else? So what did you talk about?
Hello, Volker and I talked about improving the policy relevance, not before the project or after the project, but actually during the project, and how you can do this to make it more flexible and achieve the needs of policymakers while you're doing it. And one way we are thinking about doing a very practical way is to have a contact, a policy contact that can kind of mentor you, or you can mentor him, then you can talk about what is desired by policy and whether you can integrate that within the project as it is occurring.
Okay, thank you. Then we have...
Okay, so our remark is that timing is crucial. So I would really like to once more underline what Pedro was talking about. There is going to be a huge urban debate coming up in 2016, and what better way to support it and what better way to facilitate this amount of energy and effort than to have some researchers join this project and have this kind of community or stakeholder-driven process that could very positively influence the research and then its implementation in the future. So I think Espon should think about making these processes as close as possible.
Okay, thank you very much. Kind of timing very close processes, policy relevance in the projects, using what is there.
Okay, I appreciated a lot this Espon opening to other programming, because the question is, while in Nordregio or, for example, Germany situation, there is some institutional bodies that cover the role to manage, to organize the link between policy and local level and demand. In other countries, it's not possible. So Espon has got this role to create the policy, addressing a policy scenario framework within we can introduce some specific question. But, for example, for the urban question in the next Netherlands semester, a lot of suggestions come from Urbact program and experience. So it's necessary to link these two levels, the policy, and we know that the policymaker should have a clear this question of a policy, but it's not so, and the urban level of application of a policy on the basis of diversity.
Okay, thank you. So we got, yep.
At a more concrete level, we picked up the issue that the Norwegian colleague mentioned about this perennial problem of lack of comparable data at a level below NUTS 3 level, and how that might be addressed in the new programming period. And a linked issue then for the urban agenda is, of course, that in most cases the functional area of cities don't respect administrative boundaries and data collection administrative areas, and how that could be addressed as well.
Okay, so kind of the data challenges to really get it down to reality. Any other reflections? You've been talking quite a lot. So have you been speculating about lunch, or what were you discussing? How about you? What did you talk about?
Okay. Thank you.
You're
So I'm Elodie Denizard, working for Picardy region in France. We were talking about the knowledge of Espon program at the regional level, and the program is known, but yet I think it's not used properly. Although the region is responsible for spatial planning and working with the cities at network, especially in Picardy we have small cities, so we try to help them to organize at a spatial planning level. But I don't know if it would be possible in Espon to organize a network of regional reference contact points who could have a short training or a knowledge of the database, the resources capitalized in the program, to be able to disseminate it to the city level, and at the same time to be able to collect inputs from the cities and to feed the perspective and the post 2020 period policies. So it could be interesting to have the regional level in addition to the national contact points. Well,
Okay.
so discussions with Lombardia colleague.
Thank you very much. So kind of not only having national contact points, but capitalization for the regional level and also training them on how to use the wealth of information that is there. Yes, please. Ladies first.
Just an idea. I think that the European Commission builds actually on the combination of green and blue economy. And I think that in the topical issues, we should make reference to the blue economy and to the territorial evidence needed to serve these land-sea interactions and the maritime spatial planning at different levels and scales.
Okay, thanks. A very concrete topic saying that needs to be strengthened. Yeah.
Thank you. Here at this small group, we have identified at least 3 challenges for Espon that maybe we will summarize a little bit of the interventions. The first one is data. There are new data opportunities, remote sensing products, big data, grid approach, and so on that can help overcoming some of the former problems with administrative boundaries and so on. The second one would be communication and dissemination. I mean, this is very important, and it's I'm very happy to see that this conference is web broadcasted today, so it's a very good starting point, but I think it's very important that this knowledge that Espon is producing is spread along across Europe. And thirdly, Espon should build an interlinkage between these different approaches we have been from EC policies to the research challenges, research needs. And I think this is one of the main roles that Espon should undertake by providing this, let's say, territorial evidence, but as much as free as possible. What we mean with freedom, it's that, of course, they need to provide policy makers with evidence, but with the evidence that should be as much objective as possible and not trying only to respond to the big policy priorities that the community is undertaking. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That was quite a summary already. So thanks for that. We've done my job here. I would then like to hand over to the panel. You have now heard a number of things, and maybe also from your reflections, there's something that you would like to stress and really have Espon to note down and say, Timo, when you go into the negotiation with the Espon EGTC, that's what needs to be in there. If that is not in, Espon will fail. So can you just come with a few concluding words, each of you, to say what is the most important to take on board? Shall we start in the same order as we did previously?
Thanks. I being the first, so I'll steal many of the ideas. No, I think in my view, as you have seen, I don't know anything about the future, so I would say that for Espon, what is important is to be flexible enough to be able to have the capacity to align to the policy agenda, which is a moving target.
Okay, thank you. So flexibility to adjust to policy agendas as they go along. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. I think my remarks also in line with what Philippe has been saying. I'm very glad to hear that there's a lot of enthusiasm here to work together on this urban agenda. So I think we should take this window of opportunity and see how we can work together. And I know I'm not very familiar with the procedures within Espon, but I think we should see how we can combine and adjust the time frames of the urban agenda and of the Espon working program. And let's see how we can, in the coming months, adjust each other to it.
Bring those together. Yeah. Yes, perfect. Thanks.
Often, when we work at policy-making level, we need to understand what's new. We need to pick up the shunt of new trends that are just starting. to be able to react to them on time. So I think the idea of exploring the possibility of new data sources may be less structured, but more on time could be very interesting for us.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well, I would like to mention two things because I totally agree on this about the land-sea interaction as an incredibly important topic. But again, I would actually repeat what I said in the next to the last slide. That is, Europe is not in a vacuum. Europe is in a global setting, and therefore, what happens inside Europe is also reflecting what takes place outside Europe, and therefore, to some extent, it should be reflected in the projects that take place. Otherwise, we don't see, well, we are sitting inside today, but it may be raining and whatever outside, and we need to take, well, yeah. So, yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, talking about inside and outside, I would like to have a last few minutes of your attention, or action. You have those bags that you got at the check-in reception when you registered for the conference. There's a box looking something like that. Please, can you take that out of your bag? Well, those who got a bag, obviously there seems to be a two-class society here. Cohesion is still an issue.
I'm sorry, for those who doesn't have their bags, you can take them at the registration desk when going to lunch.
Yes. So what you find in there is a kind of handcrafted little bird. And I think that we can follow Adam's piece of advice. You wanted to tweet things out to the world. Yes, please, go for it. Kind of tweet out to the world what you have. So, and when you now, you're reaching the outside world with your tweets. Latvia is famous for its birds and quite a bird-rich country, so that's why you get those home. But now that you have used them today, when you unpack back home, put it on your desk, and write your best thought to Espon, saying what Espon needs to do. Having thought about it a little bit more, you can use that as a reminder to tweet back to Espon whenever you have a good idea how Espon could contribute to your policies or what Espon could do to have the latest piece of data being and analyzing Twitter data or even things that come post-Twitter. Okay, well, that's all for this session. Our host invites you for lunch.
We're approaching lunchtime, and lunch will be on the first floor of the hotel, so you have to go down by elevator, and then you have to be back here at 2 o'clock again. So we wish you have a good lunch and little bit stretch your legs, and please be back here at 2 o'clock.
Okay, thanks. Okay. And once again, thank you for the speakers of this session.